over. It's the Patrick Netherton Show, 11:30, The Tiger. He's Rogers Hampton. I'm Patrick Netherton. We welcome in an old friend making her first appearance on the news show. I say the news show. It's been on for almost a year now. Sports business herself, writer for Forbes about sports business. She is Kristi Dosh. Kristi, what's up?
Hey, it's so good to be back with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Did you know that song? Because I've never heard of that before. Buffalo Stand?
I did not know that song.
Yeah.
I was thinking, is that like a commercial? And then you started talking, and I was like, oh, that's like bumper music. What is that?
No, I don't know what that was. Look, Rogers is usually on point with his music, but today that was, I don't know, something a little weird.
We all learned something new.
I'm
That's
telling
the important
you.
thing.
I'm all about teaching folks. Speaking of teaching folks, that's what we got you here for. You have to teach us. You wrote a really nice piece in Forbes about the whole names, images, and likenesses issue that's kind of come to the front burner here in college athletics. I'm curious. So you wrote a piece basically about, okay, what would you went back and compiled jersey sales numbers for A&M when Johnny Manziel was there, for a lot of the other schools that were, because a lot of people think, okay, Johnny Manziel, a guy that would have sold a ton of jerseys and would have made a lot of money, but you found out differently. What did you find, and were you surprised by what you found when you went and did this research?
Yeah, so this was something I looked into years ago when I was at ESPN, sort of in real time as all these conversations were happening around the O'Bannon lawsuit and around whether or not student athletes should get paid for their use of their name, image, and likeness. I mean, this act in California is not a new conversation. It's been going on for years now. And I remembered that back then I compiled jersey sales and video game sales because those were the two things that people were saying, oh, student athletes should get a cut because you're using their name or their number or their face, in the video games, or you're selling their jersey with their number on it. Well, what's happened is the video game doesn't exist anymore, and most schools no longer use current player names or numbers on jerseys. So I can't look at sales now because it doesn't happen anymore. So I went back to all that data I had before just to show fans that schools aren't making that much either. I mean, quite frankly, EA Sports, Adidas, Nike, they are making the money potentially, but it's not the schools who are making money on that. And I think the pieces of the pie aren't as big as fans believe that they are. So as much as I think this, act in California was sort of a moral victory for people who think that, student athletes should get paid, I don't know that it really means much money for them.
Well, and the other thing that you look at is, I don't know that we're not a jersey buying culture very much anymore, especially at the collegiate level, I feel like. The NFL still sells a lot of jerseys. I don't believe that colleges do. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like colleges, they'd wear a number 2 Texas A&M T-shirt before they would wear a number 2 Texas A&M jersey. Does that seem fair?
That's absolutely true. When people do buy jerseys, they don't buy them very often. Like, I still have the same jersey I bought in law school at UF. That was 12 or 13 years ago.
Right.
Because, it's just not one of those things you purchase every year. And I talked to a number of schools about it, and jersey sales just aren't big. And in fact, a lot of schools have trouble getting jerseys made because their deals with Adidas and Nike and Under Armour require that they have certain purchase minimums. And quite a few schools told me they struggle to meet the purchase minimums, even when they've got commitments from Dick's Sporting Goods and Academy and, major retailers. The jerseys just aren't that big of a draw. It is more of the T-shirts with the numbers and that sort of thing. And now most schools just don't put current player numbers on those so that they don't have to have this argument about whether student athletes should be compensated for it.
Well, let me ask you a question then. Do you think, let's say that the names, images, and likenesses were allowed when Johnny Manziel played, do you think jersey sales of a number 2 jersey that actually said Manziel on it would have been higher than just a random number 2 with no name on the back of it?
It's hard to say. They did produce a jersey with a number 2 on it in 2013. I even went back and asked just to make sure I was remembering that correctly.
Yeah, I remember those jerseys.
They did produce a number 2 in 2013, and I've got their jersey sales over a 5-year period. There was a tiny spike, and I'm talking, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think it was like $5,000 or $6,000 more than they had sold the year before. So we're not talking a substantial amount of money for the number. Now, Texas A&M is sort of a unique case in that I think the number 12 there is far more popular than any student athlete number would ever be. So that's kind of a tough one to look at because they just have a different culture there around numbers. But my conversations with licensing directors at other schools were that they don't believe sales would be any greater with player name and numbers because they're gone so quickly. By the time someone shows the potential to be really great at the college level, they're out the door in a year or two. And so I think people tend to get jerseys that will last a little longer.
I wonder if they had the name stamped on the back of it. I feel like that would be a more popular, especially a guy that won the Heisman. You can keep a Johnny Manziel jersey forever. I don't think that's ever going to really go out of style, even no matter what he did in the NFL or didn't do in the NFL.
I was going to say, I don't know if a lot of them would still want to wear something with his name on it based on conversations I've had, but sure.
Yeah, or let's say a Joe Burrow at LSU. You put a 9 jersey out there with Burrow on the back, and I have a feeling, especially because of the year he's had, people would buy that and would hold on to it. Although, the 18 jersey probably would be more popular because that's the big number. So then I guess the question becomes, talking to Kristi Dosh, you can find her on Twitter at SportsBizMiss. She's a sports business writer for Forbes, among a lot of other things that she does, a lot of other hats she wears. But Kristi, so where would the money come from? Are we talking car dealerships that are going to have athletes come out and hold autograph signings, or would it? Where do you think the money might actually come from, if not from the merchandising?
Yeah, that's where it gets tough, is that you have to look at the deals that are sort of already in place for coaches to get a little bit of intel on what this might look like. And when coaches sign their contracts with schools, there are provisions in there that prevent them from signing sponsorship deals or endorsement deals with competing entities. So let's say the local Ford dealership is an official sponsor of the athletic department. The coach can't then go sign with the Chevy dealership. If they could do anything, it would be with the Ford dealership under the terms of the deal that the athletic department already has. And so you really limit the ability of not just student athletes, but coaches too. You limit the ability of individuals to go cut deals because the deals can't conflict with existing athletic department deals around town. So that's going to limit the number of opportunities. And then even if you find a business or a brand that isn't in conflict with something already on campus or in the athletic department, well, the athletic department probably isn't going to let you use the school's intellectual property. So you're not going to be wearing a jersey or a T-shirt that's got the school logo on it. You are going to have to get by 100% on your name and your face. And how many student athletes are recognizable enough to make some real money off of their name and their face? Sure, there are some, but we are talking a small number of student athletes who could cut these deals without having any sort of athletic department backing or any sort of university intellectual property. And it's not that student athletes would be targeted. Coaches are under these exact same rules, and that's kind of how we can guess what the relationship would look like with student athletes, is because we already see it in coaching contracts.
2 things. One, weren't we already talking about a very small percentage of guys anyway? Maybe an offensive, maybe a local eatery signs up an offensive line to come out there and and support the local wing joint or whatever. But aren't we? We're talking about maybe the star player for every team in their local market and maybe one other guy. This was already going to be a limited scope thing in terms of the guys that could make real, actual, legitimate money, though, right?
That's my belief, but it's been interesting to see the conversation coming out of California from the politicians who backed this and from others who backed it, and from, pro athletes and former student athletes who've joined in the conversation, who've all made it sound like, all the people on the swim team and the volleyball team are all going to be cashing in on all sorts of deals now. I have never believed that was the case. I've always believed it was maybe a handful of football and men's basketball players. Maybe you'd occasionally have a standout, baseball player or women's basketball player. You could have some outliers here and there, but we're not talking everybody who's on the swim team is going to be able to cash in. I just don't see that happening, but it's been interesting to see it framed as if all student athletes are going to be able to take advantage of this equally, when I don't think that's the case at all. The
other question I had regarding, you mentioned you can't go and be sponsored by or deal with a conflicting business that is already established. If it's the local Ford dealership that is an official partner of Alabama Crimson Tide Athletics, you can't go find the Nissan dealership and sponsor them. Do you believe that's going to be written into whatever ultimately ends up getting done here? Because I think something's going to get done. Do you believe that's going to be one of the parts that's written into it?
I do, because it happens with coaches, and coaches have way more leveraging power than student athletes will ever have. They've got professional agents who've been in there for decades working on these deals, and they have those sort of exclusions in their contracts. So I absolutely believe that if student athletes are able to profit off their name, image, and likeness, there's still going to be rules and contracts around that. And quite frankly, the rules are already there in the existing contracts. I guarantee you, if you pulled a campus-wide Coca-Cola contract or you pulled an Adidas contract for the athletic department, it covers things like that. It might not talk about student athletes specifically, but it's going to talk about that no entity, or person related to the athletic department or the university, perhaps at large, you can have something that conflicts with this agreement. So I do think even if they're allowed to profit, they're going to be under the same rules we've seen coaches live under, and they're not going to be able to cut deals that are in direct conflict with existing sponsors. And that's not just the athletic department. I mean, a lot of what we see now are university-wide deals. So we're talking about, beverage kind of deals at the university level too.
Yeah, that's why I always hate when I go visit a school that's a Pepsi school.
I'm right there with you.
The official, and I hope Pepsi's not a sponsor of anything on this station, but the official slogan of Pepsi is, "Would Pepsi be okay?" And the answer is always no. Kristi Dosh from Sports Biz writer for Forbes. Again, you can find her at Sports Biz Miss. All right, so what do you think ultimately happens here? You've got a bill passed in California. You got one in Florida that they're trying to push through. You got multiple other states that are working on this. Now you've got a federal bill that's being pushed forward. Where do you think this ultimately ends up? Do you think this is something that actually gets done, that the NCAA, with this group that they put together to look at it, do you think they actually pull their head out of the sand, move into the modern day, and elect to go ahead and let folks profit off of their name, image, or likeness?
Yeah, I think the NCAA pursues legal action, and I've seen a few different theories on what they could sue on. They've got time because the California bill doesn't go into effect until January of 2023, so they have a little time to fight it on legal grounds. But I do think ultimately there will be some sort of compromise where the NCAA will allow something. A lot of what I've heard floated around is that they might allow them to profit off name, image, and likeness, but all monies would have to be put into a trust fund that they wouldn't get until their eligibility is complete, something like that. So I do think we will see something come out at the NCAA level eventually, because it's not going to make sense to have a different law in every state. It's going to create recruiting advantages and disadvantages. It's going to be impossible to sort of monitor. So I don't think the solution is having every state pass its own bill, because we've already seen the ones that are getting introduced each look a little different.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to have to be something uniform across the board, and it'd just be interesting to see how long it takes to get that done. I would be surprised if the federal government really gets involved in this.
Well, I just want to say I cannot wait till this happens, and sometime, let's say Trevor Lawrence wins the national title, and he's getting interviewed on the field, and they say, Trevor, just tell us about that incredible performance. And he said, I couldn't have done it without Head and Shoulders, making my hair look as beautiful as it does. I honestly
can't wait for that.
I can't wait. Or even better, and I'll tell you this is even better. I want him to say, you know what? This wouldn't have been possible without at Sports Biz Miss sponsoring me and making sure that I could get through college. I think you need to be on board, Kristi. This needs to be part of your brand.
Get in on the ground floor.
Yes. I need at Sports Biz Miss wristbands for all college athletes, the star athletes out there. We need to make this happen.
Hey, I'm all for that. Let's make it happen.
I'm telling you. Look, I always have good ideas, Kristi. I have no ability to get any of my ideas into fruition at any point in time. Hey, thank you so much
we'll
again.
Work together.
Yeah, we'll work on it. Thank you so much again for your time. Welcome back to the show. We really appreciate it. Look forward to chatting with you down the road.
Thanks for having me.
All right, at Kristi Dosh, at Sports Biz Miss, Kristi Dosh, sports business writer for Forbes. She's fantastic. Nobody does a better job of figuring out the money that's involved and really getting into the nitty-gritty of it. So great to have